What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Deep Thought. My name's Nasib, and let's get into today's topic. So today's topic is going to be on a topic that I've done before. It's going to be in regards to masculinity. This one is going to be in regards to essentially toxic levels of masculinity and how they're impacting the world that we've created and we are going to create in the future. Now, the reason I want to bring this up is because there has been a wild amount of controversy over a simple commercial about razors. And I'm sure a lot of you already know what I'm talking about when I mention that. It's about that Gillette commercial that has created a fire under everybody to essentially go out and start defending themselves and their masculinity. Because Gillette essentially came out and said, well, deconstructed all the things that we do as men to prove our masculinity, and that sometimes when we do it, when we go to that extreme, it's wrong. It's for the wrong reasons. And two, that it's not okay to treat people the way that we do whenever we are in that state of extreme masculinity. So I'd like to get right to the point of one of the points in the actual commercial that was about a single saying that everybody's heard. Every boy, every man has heard this, and it is, boys will be boys. Now, to put that into perspective for some people that don't really understand that saying, when people say boys will be boys, it's essentially saying, you know what, it's okay, he's a man, he can do it, he can do whatever he wants, it's okay. And correct me if I'm wrong, but essentially when we go out of our way and say, well, boys will be boys, we're saying that type of behavior is okay. Most of the time when we use that saying, analogy, whatever you want to call it, that phrasing, it's usually because we are saying that it's okay for men to behave a certain way. And when we do that, it's usually in a way that we probably shouldn't be behaving. So on the ad, it actually goes out and says, goes out of its way and says, boys would be boys when two boys go at one another and they start fighting. And when you say that boys will be boys and you see two children fighting one another, we're allowing them to believe that, it's okay to go out of your way and whenever you feel angry and mad and upset, to go and take it out on somebody else. It doesn't matter who it is. It doesn't matter that you're mad at them. Just go out of your way and pummel them, and that'll make you feel great. That'll make you, that makes you a man. And that's what we essentially grow up thinking. That's what most men believe whenever they're growing up, because that is the type of norm that we grow up with. Whenever we see two boys fighting, we hear adults over saying things like, oh, well, boys will be boys, let them be. And that's it, end of story, nothing. We don't go out of our way to stop that behavior, to tell them that it's not okay to take out your frustration on somebody else. And it's because we don't understand ourselves. We don't know ourselves well enough. But that still doesn't make it right. So there is this stigma behind masculinity now because of things like that. Because we've allowed that type of behavior to be rewarded and suffer no consequence when it happens. Now, there was another part of the commercial where it actually went into, I believe it was something along the lines of, harassment, essentially sexual harassment, and that's not okay too. And that comes from some extreme forms of masculinity. The men that believe that they own the world, and this is where some ideas of the God complex comes into play, because some men believe that they are the world, the gift to the universe. And let me just say this out front right now: you're not. None of us are. Nobody is. Nobody is special. Nobody is here better than anybody else. But there are these men that have these toxic levels of masculinity to where they believe that they can get away with damn near anything, and they try. Sexual harassment is their go-to. They go out of their way and harass not just women, but men alike. They harass men verbally and try to abuse them physically. Most of the time they get away with it because men are actually afraid to stand up against men like that because they believe that they hold some sort of power, but we'll get into that later. But essentially what those men tend to do when they have high levels of masculinity that they are just exuding and taking advantage of, they go out of their way and they harass not only men but women as well. This is where we get harassment in the workplace. This is where we get sexual harassment in the workplace. Sexual harassment in public places, like even the grocery store. These men will take it to the outside world anywhere they go. And we believe that it's okay because we are not shown and told as young children when we're growing up that this type of behavior is not okay. So you see, we're raised in this society where you are praised for doing something wrong. You're praised for doing something against a human being, and therefore you are awarded if you are a victor or the victor. And then you're told, oh, well, that's okay. And then you grow up and become one of those men until, you eventually start reading some books, some self-development books, and then you start to realize maybe in your late 30s, early 40s, maybe even late 40s, maybe 50s, that this type of behavior was never okay, and that you have been living a lie, essentially. The reason I say that is because toxic levels of masculinity come from people that are in fear, in just a mode of fear at all times. Whenever you are scared or terrified, there is a rush of adrenaline in men that we get, and there's a masculinity factor in it that just overrides everything, and we have to be best at everything. We have to be number one. We have to be the greatest thing since sliced bread. So I'm getting a little sidetracked here, but because of this toxic masculinity, we've allowed it to be okay for men to certain other men and women a certain way, because we don't correct their actions. We don't tell them, don't do that to another human being. When you start looking at another person from the perspective that you actually see other people, is when you'll understand that everybody else is a human just like you are. And when I said earlier that you're not special, I meant it. Nobody is. But we like to believe that we are. We like to say that we are because we believe that we can get away with it. And it's that exact thought process, the fact that we believe that we can get away with it, because we are indeed special, and somehow, because we feel special in the society, we believe that we can get away with this type of behavior and not get in trouble for it. And if you don't believe me, go watch a toddler play around for a couple of hours. But you see, there's been this whole uproar on masculinity ever since Gillette put out this commercial, and honestly, I agree with it. I do agree with Gillette, and I do believe they made it. They sculpted it in such a way and made it palatable and digestible for all of us to look at it and understand and think to ourselves, you know what, that is what we do sometimes, and know that it's not okay. When we look at it from a perspective of two other people doing it, because we have such a myopic view on ourselves, when we see it from a third person view, we start to realize, you know, that type of behavior isn't okay. And this whole dramatic experience that people are creating for this company, for creating a commercial that exposes men in an extremely poisonous form of masculinity, is what we need to see. It's what we need to really dive into right now, because we're seeing it all over the place. You know, and we're seeing it not just in the workplace, but we're seeing it all over the place. If you want to take, for example, and I don't like to use him as an example, but in this case I will, if you would like to take a look at the President of the United States and the way that he behaves, he has a toxic level of masculinity. And the reason I'm saying this is because he has an ego that far exceeds anybody else I have ever met in my life. And he's a perfect example. But when it comes to the level of society and how it impacts us, it really sets us back, because we don't do anything about it. We allow people like him and everybody else and every other man that acts and behaves this way, we allow them to get away with it. And it's not okay. It's really not. I've been there. I have experienced the extreme levels of masculinity, and it doesn't really feel all that good. It really doesn't. It sucks sometimes. But going forward, I think what we need to do is start looking around us, and, you know, we don't necessarily have to correct people at every turn, but when we see something completely awry, that's when we need to step in as a human being, as a person, and say, you know what, that isn't okay. Don't treat somebody like that. Now, the men that do this the most, that have the toxic levels of masculinity, are the men that go out and beat women. The ones that do that have the highest level of masculinity. They try to pretend that they do anyway, but they don't. But that's just an example of what it could do to people, what it could do to us as a society, and what it has done to men in today's society, because there are still men that do that. There are men that go around gloating with an ego the size of the Empire State Building, and they don't believe anything that they do is wrong. They don't believe anybody that tells them anything. They just live in this world that they created now because of the way that they've been raised. So it's time for us to start taking responsibility for the society that we've created. And the first thing we can do is start by correcting these issues that we have within our society. Men and women alike. Women know us better than we do. We don't even know ourselves. But men, especially here and now, this is where you need to step up to the plate. Alright, we can't go around telling our kids or young ones, nephews and nieces, telling them, hey, if they got into a fight, they tell you, I got into a fight. You don't go out and tell them, did you win? I mean, of course, secretly, we want them to have won that battle, but we would much rather prefer that they never got into it in the first place. So why encourage that behavior by asking them, did you win? So this is where we need to come together as men and start telling other boys that it's not okay to behave that way. It's not okay to harm other people. I think there was a quote from an earlier president of the United States that had said, "Your freedom of expression ends at the tip of my nose." So that says many things, and that may resonate with some of you. That may not. You might take it however you want to take it, but overall, my message here today is because Gillette has created a commercial that has allowed us to look at ourselves, take a really good hard look at ourselves as men, and correct our actions. This is not a dig on any man today. This is not a dig on any man that is watching my video. This is not a dig on any one of us. This is an opportunity. This is a chance for us to grow. This is a chance for us to change things.